school offices, and senior room, and the fourth for dorms and an infirmary. It was a self-contained organism with students constantly crisscrossing the courtyard. The only time we left during the week was to go to the sports field, which were a few minutes' walk away, or to go into town. Because it came alive in the summer, Lenox had a few shops most small towns didn't. There were 2 clothes stores, a pharmacy, a coffee house, aptly called the Cafe, and a record store that stocked the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, as well as Brahms and Beethoven. Girls at Stonybridge were allowed to go into town on weekends and 2 weekdays after sports, provided they signed out, went in pairs or larger groups, and stayed only an hour before signing back in. 1 weekend every 2 months we could go home if we chose to, but we also had a required number of school outings on Saturdays, expeditions to a place of historical or geographical interest. And once every 6 weeks or so, we'd be shipped off in a bus to a boys' boarding school for a dance. In town, we'd hang out in the cafe or the record store, feeling a little liberated and a touch more adult. If a dance was on the horizon, we might try the shops for clothes, but they were aimed at women, not teenagers. So generally, we made fun of the clothes and left quickly. Academic excellence was not a requirement. You went to Stonybridge if you couldn't get into a school like Madeira or Miss Porter's, or if your mother had gone there and it was a family tradition. It wasn't a Swiss finishing school. We weren't taught manners or how to walk with the right posture, but we weren't supposed to worry about our future careers either. Careers were for men. Our class entered Stonybridge in 1966. At the time, boarding schools for girls were supposed to be havens of respectability for the entitled, a WASP variation of Catholic schools run by nuns. What our parents didn't take into consideration was the 60s, and the legacy of the 60s that hit the 70s and just kept running. They weren't prepared for the generational seismic shift that was happening. Girls weren't getting their hair permed and wearing bobby socks anymore. Teenagers had become rebellious and hungry for experience. And suddenly, there were a lot more experiences out there to be had. So the parents of Stonybridge girls might have thought their daughters were safely tucked away, but they had no idea what kind of trouble we could get in. But then again, neither did we. Not one of us could have foreseen the doom heading our way. The class of 1970 considered ourselves a special class, one that played on the edges of the rule books and got away with it. One with a shared sense of humor, a cohesive group that should have kept in touch over the years because we were different. We were memorable. There had been that morning in May of our senior year when someone had put Aretha Franklin on her stereo and blasted Chain of Fools out over the courtyard. Everyone in our class jumped up on the walls separating the courtyard from the classrooms and danced our hearts out as the lower classes looked at us with what we knew was admiration. They'd miss us when we were gone. So would the teachers. Everyone would miss us. I remember thinking then that we should do the exact same thing on our 10th reunion. Get up on the wall and recreate the joy, the spirit, the beautiful abandon of those minutes dancing in the sun. It would have been a perfect way to celebrate a 10th reunion, or any number reunion. But the class of 1970 was never going to get back up on that wall and try to recreate the past. How can you link arms and dance when you don't know which person in that chain of fools is a murderer? Part 1. Chapter 1. 1969. September 10th. First day of senior year. Karen Mullens. Karen wandered into the senior room looking for a place to hide. She needed to get away from the dorm, from the sound of Cassidy Thomas and Abby Madison, and a whole gang of girls on their first day back, discussing their summer vacations. At assembly that afternoon, Miss Adams had done her usual welcome to Stonybridge or welcome back to Stonybridge speech, then made some announcements, one of which was to tell them about the senior room, where seniors could get together and talk and smoke, and what a privilege it was for them to have it. Creating a smoking room was the kind of weird thing Miss Adams would do. She wasn't a normal headmistress. Yes, she was a middle-aged